To post-lunch recovery. Thank you all for coming. I hope you've had a good first half of the day so far. I wanted to introduce you to Stephen Cross, who's a longtime friend and colleague and fellow co-host of Talking Drupal, our weekly video show on Drupal that we broadcast, and also fellow organizer of the Providence Drupal meetup, and one of the organizers of a new event coming to the New England area, the New England Drupal Camp, coming November 1st in Providence, Rhode Island. And he's going to be talking about how to bring responsive design into the selling process. And I think this is it's always been a really well-received talk when he's given it as part of our boot camp workshops before, and it's a lot of really great tips for how to educate your clients and make this part of your everyday. So take it away, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Doesn't sound like that's on. Oh, it is on. Okay. It's kind of interesting. All those things that Jason just mentioned that I'm involved with, none of those things bring in any money. I don't get paid for any of them. So at some point, we have to sell. How many people are salespeople that are in this room? Hands up. I can't see too well with the bright lights. Oh, so half the people are salespeople. There you go. Great, important point. So I hope at the end of this talk that when I say how many salespeople do we have in the room, everyone's going to raise their hand. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Stephen Cross. These things up here are all the things that Jason mentioned. I just want to reemphasize that there is a responsive boot camp tomorrow for a day, Sunday, for anyone who's interested. And a little bit more about me to start. I'm a business owner. I'm a developer. I'm a husband, a father, a designer. I put those little quotes around that because that's something that sometimes I think I am, but I'm not that good at it. I'm a technology enthusiast. I'm a manager. I'm a mentor. I'm a chess player, quotes again, because I like chess, but I'm not very good at it. I'm a moviegoer. I'm a reality TV buff in the genre of cooking. So if there's a cooking show in reality TV, I'm taping it. I'm also did I mention that I'm a father and a husband? I'm a son. I'm not as good a son as I am a husband and father. And I might even want to add I'm a smoker, joker, and midnight toker. And way at the end of this list is I'm a salesman. And it's funny because all those things that I just mentioned require sales. And I don't consider myself a salesman. But I started my business in 1996. I think that's 18 years if I'm doing the math right. And I'm probably responsible for about $30 million of revenue coming into the company. And I'm not the sales guy. I'm not the salesman. But what am I is all those things that I just listed. And my definition of sales for the context of today's talk is that I'm really trying to help someone understand my vision for their future. That's what sales is to me. I don't like selling things. I don't like convincing people to buy stuff, but I really love to share my thoughts and excitement for technology and ways to improve people's business. That's what I do. I like to excite people about new ideas. So to me, that's what selling is. And there's a key point here that I'm using the word vision. We're going to talk about that more in a few minutes. But if there is no vision, then you really have nothing to sell. Today, we're really going to focus on 4 things. There are 4 elements, 4 actions you take during what we'll call the sales process or the sales pitch. I hate all of those terms. But there are 4 things that I think you should focus on if you're trying to convince somebody else about your vision for the future. And we're going to look at those things through the eyes of responsive web design. Why responsive web design? Because it's still needed out there. Does anyone know the percentage of companies that are maybe in probably the top 100 of the internet that currently have responsive websites? That sounds like a good number. I think it's a little lower than that, but that's probably about what it is. So in the top 100 websites, 25% of them are responsive web design. There's a long way to go. How many people out here are building responsive sites right now? That's good. How many people feel that responsive design is the norm for their customers and the sites they build? It's about the same number. That's interesting. And I find that way too, because I've been building them since October of 2010. And that's sort of a date that some responsive design people are familiar with, because it was the publishing of Ethan Marquardt's document, or his post on, which blog was that on? List Apart, thank you. That's when that blog post came out. And when it was only a few months after that I started to get interested in it and started building sites that way real shortly after that. So in my mind, everyone has a responsive website, but that's actually not true. So we're going to use some case study today of materials that I use in presentations all the time for selling responsive websites to people. And I put this slide up because, you know, the techniques and the things that we're going to talk about today, those 4 important action items, I imagine will be something I'll be using in the next 6 months to try to sell Drupal 8 sites to people. I'm going to use the same way of gathering information. I'm going to use the same way of selling it to people or sharing my vision with them. So the techniques today are going to apply to many things. Who do we sell to? We sell to everybody. We're always selling. We're selling internally, a new direction in our own company. Sometimes we're trying to sell to ourselves ideas about new visions. I often am trying to convince my partner in my business about new directions we should go in. I feel like, you know, a year ago I was selling Git. And I think I'm still selling that to some degree. I'm trying to sell SaaS and Compass. I'm trying to sell a new health plan for the employees. I'm trying to sell, you know, what movie me and my wife should go see next weekend. So we're always selling, but we're talking about selling internally and externally. It's whenever you want to sell that vision to someone else. And in the tech world, we need to be selling all the time, because everything is changing, constantly changing. What would you guys say is the next big thing coming out? And maybe for some of you, it's responsive design now, but it seems like that was because I was talking about this stuff like 2 years ago. So what is the next big thing that you should be selling? What are those things?
I mean, well, for me, it's responsive. It's like we're sold on responsive, and
Yep.
savvy clients are sold on responsive, but there's this universe of clients that I still feel like I'm wailing on responsive all the time.
So responsive is a hot one. Anyone else got another one of new technology that's coming out related to the web that we might be thinking about selling? What's that?
Getting other developers to start using SaaS.
SaaS and Compass. You know, yeah, that was a hot point in my company. I sold that internally a while ago. Web fonts. Jason mentioned web fonts. That's a good thing as well. When I started selling responsive design, I did have to sell it internally first. And when I sold it internally, I was selling it to people so we could get the experience so I could bring it to a customer. And we're selling it for lots of reasons. We sell because we need change in our organization. We sell because we need more business. And we need new offerings to new customers. We can't ignore that. If you built someone a website 3 years ago and they're not responsive, you now have something to sell to them. You have a way to generate revenue. So as soon as all my customers have responsive design, now I need something else to sell to them, right? So always looking ahead is a part of growing a business as well. And that's important for who's in opening new doors for yourself. One thing that comes up often, I'm not going to spend much time on this today, unless maybe in the QA section, is who pays for responsive design and who pays for new technology. When I started responsive design, I paid through really R&D and time that my employees spent working on responsive sites to learn it. Then the first number of customers I went to, it was an add-on. So if you want this site, if you now want a mobile experience, it's going to cost you this extra. And then I quickly moved away from that into it's just the way we do stuff. So the cycle in the technology world is very similar to that all the time. It's you got to pay the price internally, then figure out how you're going to get paid for that back, maybe with the first set of customers, and then it just becomes part of your normal flow until you move on to the next piece. So I have 3 prerequisites when you start to think about selling. The first thing is you have to believe. So any sales book that you pick up from Zig Ziglar or someone else, they'll always tell you that you have to believe in the product you're selling. If you don't believe it, nobody will buy it. This sounds so elementary and so basic, but it is absolutely so true. If you're trying to sell something to someone, they can see on your face immediately that you either believe in it or you don't. So you better start believing early on. And truly, if you don't believe it, I often wonder if it's unethical to be trying to sell it to somebody else if you're not believing in that product yourself. Another prerequisite is enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is required, but it's not enough. So to be very excited about the technology, but not being able to explain it to somebody, especially someone who's going to pay for it, in a structured way in order to get them to buy it or to agree into your vision, you're not going to go very far. I'm sure that I could use enthusiasm to convince my wife to go see Dumb and Dumber 2 when it comes out in November on opening night. Actually, I'm not so sure I could convince her of that. But I'll just leave it at that. I'm not sure where that analogy came from. The last prerequisite I have is do your homework. So I'm giving you the homework step assignment today. It's going to be those 4 things we're going to talk about, and you need to do those before you try to share your vision with someone else. You will fail if you don't prepare properly. So let's talk about the 4 things that I've been mentioning. And I call this on this slide approaching a pitch. There's 4 sections here. One is define the problem. Any sales book will tell you very similar steps to these. Second one, create a vision. Third one, provide expert support, because in many cases, you might not always be considered the expert. And the 4th one is demos and examples to support everything that you're trying to sell somebody. So as I've given this presentation and versions of this in the past, some people have often said, hey, you should come up with some sort of acronym for that. So I was wondering what you guys thought about this. PIVSDA, I think, is easy to remember, and an easy way for you to get through the steps so you can remember this in the future. Clearly, I'm just kidding. I can't come up with an acronym for this, so you're just going to have to remember steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first one is define the problem. And defining the problem to me is a clear definition of what a problem is. And when I talk about a problem, I mean the reason why you are approaching someone in the first place. It's a problem you have to fix. So if someone doesn't have something broken, you can't fix it. So if you're thinking about responsive design, if someone has a website and this is a hard one for me to actually give you the counter to, but I'm going to try anyway. So someone has a website, because I have a customer like this that refuses to go to responsive design. They have a website that is viewable on tablets. Their traffic is showing that very, very few of their customers go from a mobile device, a phone size. They're mostly coming in on tablets. It's 1 or 2%. So in the customer's eyes, he doesn't have a problem. I'm going to give you some counters to that in a few minutes. But if you can't clearly identify the problem you're trying to fix, you're going to have a hard time selling your vision to somebody. When you create a problem, and I'm going to show you how I've created them in a few minutes, you want to try to be as personal as possible. So if I think Jason has a problem, I'm going to say to Jason, hey, Jason, I think your shirt is horrible. It looks terribly untucked, and it's all crooked. That's to him, that's a personal problem that I'm pointing out. The more personal you can get with your customer, the better off you are. You're going to do that through how? You're going to do it through site examples that are directly related to them, if not their site exactly. You want to be able to also present your problem in a way that you're talking to the audience that's receiving your message. So for example, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to talk to maybe an executive in a company about the benefits of responsive design if he has no idea what responsive design is, or if maybe he doesn't use a tablet whatsoever or a mobile device. If he's a guy that just comes into the office at 9 o'clock in the morning and sits at his desktop computer and then leaves, it's a very difficult way, or it's very difficult to talk to him about responsive design without bringing what his experience is into the picture. Last point here is you need to have visuals, analogies, examples, and hands-on problems to show the problem that way. And I'm going to show you a few of those now. To go back to our case study, in terms of responsive design, there's two things that you could approach, and there's probably 10 things. I'm going to give you two examples of approaching a problem in terms of describing responsive design. The first one is a concept called barrier to consumption. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that before. Probably not, because I made that up a few years ago. I guess I don't have any groupies here. What barrier to consumption is, it's how easy a customer or a user of a website can get to the content. And anything that's put in its way to prevent the customer from getting that content is what I call this barrier of consumption. So what you want to always try to do is explain to people that the more barriers they have up in front of their content, the more difficult it is for the end user. It's really the basics of what responsive design is all about. Using the word barrier for presenting a problem is really effective when you're explaining this to someone who's trying to understand what you're telling them, because barrier is clearly, it's in the way of them getting content. Another concept that we're going to drill into a little more is maximizing marketing efforts. I'm not sure, this concept seems to be lost often when I've seen people present responsive design. I'm not sure why. This is about making sure that everyone's marketing efforts, so by that I mean in today's world it's social media, Twitter, Facebook, people are still, and maybe going back to email a little bit more lately, in terms of newsletters, they're putting a lot of effort into that marketing, but their websites are not responsive design, and where is all that content and those users coming from? They're coming from mobile devices and landing on a website that's not responsive. It's an issue. So they're wasting dollars and effort on marketing, and you need to point that out to them. So how would we do that? So here's a couple of ways that I've done this in presentations, and for you to use as a way to think about it yourself. I've used this analogy of a poster story. So if you look up on the screen here, I want to see what you see. So on the left-hand side is a poster. It's actually an 8.5 by 11 for a conference that I did 2 years ago. And it was hung up in, and this is a story that I tell customers, by the way, so I'm telling you sort of the same story here. It was a conference that I did in Providence for responsive design. And the way we promoted it, we created a poster. So I wanted people in Providence area to learn about this conference. So what I did, I hung my poster around at various coffee shops. You can see it on the right-hand side there. Whoops. It's hanging, push the wrong button, so I can go back. It's hanging at a Starbucks on the right-hand side. So this would attract anyone who's walking into a Starbucks. So then I want to market my message to a few more people. So I thought, you know what? There's bus stops all around Providence. What I could do is go to the bus stops and put signs at all the bus stops so I could get all the pedestrians. There's a lot of college traffic in Providence. So what we did is we put our sign up at the bus stations, rented a bunch of spaces, and hung our sign. I'm not sure how effective that was. I'm wondering what you think. But our marketing efforts were even bigger at this point, that we wanted to reach more people. So we're looking at these billboards out on 95. And there's thousands of cars that travel between Boston and Providence on a daily basis. So why don't we actually go use the billboards and see if we can't promote our conference there? I don't know what's so funny. This was a very effective marketing campaign. This is sort of an example of a great way to show someone who's not quite getting what you're saying in terms of responsive design of barrier of consumption. The content was the same. The medium that it was being displayed on is obviously, in this example, completely ridiculous. But the same point holds true when you're taking the desktop computer and moving it down to a mobile device. If the content isn't laid out properly for that medium, it's not going to be very effective. It's there, but it's not very effective. So that's one way to illustrate. That's an example of illustrating with an analogy that someone can relate to for those people who don't actually get what responsive design is. The next thing I'm going to touch on here is back to my second point, was maximizing your marketing effort. So in this example here, on the left-hand side, I have a customer. I'm going to keep the brand unsaid, so I won't divulge who it is. And they do a lot of email marketing, and they've slowly moved to social media marketing. And when they market to millions of people at a time. So they have an email campaign that they're trying to sell a cookbook, and it will go out to 5 million people in a week. So, and if you click on their campaign, it goes to an order page that we built sitting on our servers. People order cookbooks. They order thousands of them. But what they were running into, and they didn't know that what was happening, is that over a period of time, that their pages were starting to now show up on mobile devices. And it looked great when it was sitting, let's get back to the right slide, sorry. Let's watch that bounce again. It looks good when it's sitting on the desktop computer on the right-hand side. People can see the content and order it. Very simple to use. Problem is, as the usage of mobile devices is increasing, look at the order form on the right-hand side. You know, how many people are actually going to order from a page that looks like that on their mobile phone? So what was happening to them is there was a decrease in usability at the same time that there was an increase in usage. So more and more people were going to their order pages on their mobile devices, but the usage of those pages was dropping and dropping and dropping. These are slides that I actually gave to them. I cut these out of these presentations so they could see this. And showed them additional statistics that said over 50% of the social media sites that are accessed are coming from mobile devices. It's probably higher than that now. This is probably about a year and a half old, this number. And 80% of emails that are opened at first by people using their mobile device. So the first open, these are for people with mobile devices. So this is not a good scenario for them to be in. That story ends well because they ended up rebuilding all their order pages. Made a lot of sense. I'll show you how I actually convinced them to do that in a moment. But I created that problem. So the first step we had was create the problem, define the problem. Use visuals, use stories, be personal with them about the problem you're trying to solve for them. So in the example of the cookbook company, I made it very clear about the problem we were trying to solve, which was how to get the users that are coming in through mobile phones to buy things on their mobile phones as opposed to ignoring the emails. So the second point, the second step here in terms of selling to someone is going to be to create this vision for them. I don't like to call it solving a problem. I prefer to call it create a vision. Because solving a problem just fixes one thing. But creating a vision creates direction. So when you come into someone and you're trying to solve their problem, think of it as vision you're trying to create for them, and not fix only that problem, but looking out in the future. Having a customer buy into that vision is the key to all of this. It's the key. If they buy into the vision, they've accepted the problem. It doesn't mean they're going to use you for the solution, but it does mean that they've accepted the problem. And accepting the problem is the first step in recovery, as they say, right? It's also important when you're creating vision with a customer to be open to allowing that vision to change. So as you're working with a customer and presenting your concept, the thing that you have to realize is that they also have some sort of vision. You don't know what it is often. Be open to their vision and be open to having your vision change or maybe become something new based on working together to create a vision. And I always tell people to go big. Create a vision that is bigger than the problem, which is why I'm calling it a vision to some degree. It does a couple of things for you as the salesperson. The first thing it does is showing the customer that you're looking beyond what the current issue is, which builds trust, builds some expertise. The other thing it's doing is creating revenue for you down in the future. So not just looking at the problem you're solving now, but look a little bit down the road, create that as part of the vision, and now that's something you and the customer are pointing to together, and that you can bill them for eventually, hopefully. So looking back at responsive design for creating a vision, keep in mind that responsive design is a visual thing mostly. It's a touch and a visual thing. So anything you do in terms of creating vision has to be visual. You can't pitch someone responsive design without visuals to go with it. And interactive visuals are far better than paper visuals or PowerPoints. Have people be interactive would be excellent. A tip for this, I can't remember if I touched it later in the slide, but you can always, if you get someone who's pretty good with CSS, which you generally have to be to do some responsive design work, you can always grab someone's website, just one single page, pull the HTML, and mock that page up with some CSS to make it responsive. Put in a few media queries, change some simple things around, and let a customer touch their own website in a responsive format. It generally doesn't take long to do, and it's a great tactic in terms of helping people create vision. So back to that ridiculous story a few minutes ago, you'll see that if I was creating vision to go along with that story, maybe my vision would be, you know what, maybe we should create poster-sized things for the bus stations and a mobile device for actually looking at the website during that particular conference. Here's some real befores and afters. So on the left-hand side here, it's marked as today here because when I was creating that vision at the time, I showed what the order page looked like on the mobile device at the time, and then we created these mock-ups. I think we actually created HTML. They didn't actually process orders, and it was only one section of the site, but it gave them a good vision of a good view as what the world could look like a little bit down the road. I didn't, from a sales side, have to spend a whole lot of time here, and I don't remember with these if I actually did it in Photoshop or if a designer did it in HTML, but I created this and showed this to them as what the vision looked like for the future. This is another example for another company where the left-hand side, as you can see, it's a benefit site for a bank. It looks terrible. On a mobile device, you can't really get a lot of benefits from this benefit site because you can't see them. I created this vision by showing them what it would look like in the future. This is another project that went on and was successful. This was a second part of that vision on a laptop. So the other thing to do when you're creating vision is to show success for past projects. They could be yours or they could be someone else's. I used to love to use the Boston Globe example. It's too old now to use. But it was a great example 2 years ago of what success looks like in the responsive world. It's actually still a good example today, except everyone knows about it. So I often take screenshots of projects that we've recently worked on or just finished. This was actually a very first responsive site that was of any significance in size. And so this often shows up in slides to show vision, but it's a successful vision, something that happened in the past. So these visuals are things you ought to be producing. The last thing I just want to point out here in terms of creating visions is another example of going big. So this is an example of a project where the left-hand side, it says 2012. This is for a medical study that we're working with a company in Canada. This job was pitched in 2012. It was almost 2 years ago. And at the time, they were just looking for a forum in Drupal online. Not even Drupal, they just wanted a forum. So I came into the vision, created a vision for them I understood what their problems were, which was it's a site for nursing mothers and to educate mothers on nursing and the benefits of it. It was a medical study. So I came into the project and pitched them not just the website, but how about a mobile application that a mother would have downloaded onto their phone. I hadn't built anything. I didn't know what I was going to do, but it was a vision. And I proposed that in 2012. They didn't bite off on it. They took the smaller vision, which was build a responsive website, which is what we did. In 2014, this is actually a section of that application, which is to help a mom track her feeding when she's feeding during the day. And there's apps out there like that already, but they're not tied into the data for this medical study. So the vision carried forth in the beginning in 2014, this year. This project was approved to actually take the first step into a mobile app and build that tracking tool in a responsive site, which is going to go live in about a week. And they've already given us the approval in early 2015 to launch an app. So it was a seed that was planted as a vision in an early conversation in 2012 and turns out to be now 2 years of business. And really where I wanted to get to as a company too, I hadn't built an app when I ever proposed this, but it was the only way for me to actually get there as a company is to propose a vision that I had to live up to as well as them. So we've gone through step 1, define the problem. Step 2, create a vision. Step 3, provide expert support and data. So I don't know if this is my term or someone else's. Does anyone know what the neighbor syndrome is? I don't know if anyone's ever heard that. I've used it before. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but it's this scenario that I keep telling my wife over and over again, we need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this, and she ignores me, which she does well. And then all of a sudden one day she says, you know what the neighbor said? We should do this. Have you ever thought of this before? Has anyone ever experienced that? That someone always loves to hear it from someone else. Which is why I really emphasize expert support here. And it's the other reason why at the beginning of this presentation that I mentioned, sometimes it's harder to sell something internally in your organization for this same problem. It's certainly in my company, I'm the guy who's always thinking of something new. So it becomes noise to everybody in my company at some point, because every week he's thinking of something else, coming up with something new, becomes noisy. And then my partner calls me, hey, have you heard about SAS and Compass? Yeah, I did that. I sent those 10 emails out over the past 2 months. This is the same concept here. So not that your customers don't think you are the experts or your prospects don't think you're the experts, but it's always good to bring in expert information into your presentations. And it's about getting quotes from industry leaders or people in their particular market that are saying very similar things. The way to do this is a technique that I called being a Google precog. So it's when you are going to predict ahead of time, when you walk out of the office, what they're going to Google about the presentation you just gave them. You do that Google search before you go to their office, and you provide them resources and links to the things they're going to see. Okay? Kind of a salesy strategy here a little bit. It's also the way for you to find out all the objections they're going to have. So before you do your precog work, before you go in for your presentation, you figure out who are the experts that they're going to find that are saying similar things. Give them those links ahead of time so it will look like you know of all the experts that they're aware of. And you'll also find the similar articles that are fighting against the things you're trying to present, and be prepared to talk about those things because they're going to end up finding them. So do your precog work. This gets back to my point earlier that you need to do your homework. This is doing your homework, which is right here. You always want to give examples in your presentations of their competitors and other people in the industry that are doing the things you're trying to get them to do. Very important to do that. This slide sounds the salesiest, I guess, of all the things that I've talked about, but these are important things to do. So related to this on number 3 was get experts and also provide data. Whack them with statistics is what I say. There is 2 or 3 years ago, there was not that much information out there about responsive design. You couldn't find a study that said 25% of the top 100 sites are using responsive technology. That didn't exist. It does now. There's more data out there than you can imagine to almost support any argument you want to create. So, when it comes from another source, it's expert information not coming from you. Always include it. When you provide information and resources online, always provide the source. Never quote something, unless you're standing up here in the presentation. Never quote something that doesn't have a source to it so they can go back and look later. Very important. So in the responsive design world, there's so many stats. I've used hundreds of them. They can almost back up any argument you want today. Here's some examples of some things you can easily find. And doing my Google precog work before I started the presentation today, these are probably statistics you'll find in the first Google search that you do. You'll probably find these numbers. Things like, and these are things you present to the customer. A Google survey, 48% of users, if a mobile site does not work, if their website does not, I don't think I've written that right. If their website does not work well in mobile, the company doesn't care about my business. That's what people say in surveys to Google. You can read these other 2 here on what they are. But I just encourage you to never, ever, ever not show statistics. Don't ever do it. Always provide statistics. What it does for you is when that person that you presented to turns around and presents this information to other people, you're also providing them the information they need to back up your argument. I'm going to show you some other points on that in a few minutes on techniques on how to deliver this content. But you need to keep that in mind, that often the first person you deliver to is the person that's reaching out to the other people. Show charts and graphs, please, whenever you can. This information becomes very important when people can see it in a graph. It sticks out better and works well. Use real data. Real data didn't exist 3 years ago in responsive design. Real data exists today. Sometimes I'm encouraged by the data that I see on my websites that are responsive design, and sometimes I'm not. This is an example of some charts that I've used in the past. I think they're important numbers for responsive design. The first one we're looking at here is, let me just see, the average duration. So if you look at here, it's actually taking a period of time. So this site, this was a website that I worked on in 2011 without responsive design. And then a year later, same numbers for a year later after the responsive design site was put in. You'll notice on the mobile phone we're looking at, you could see that the argument here was that the average length of the time on the website doubled for people in mobile devices. This kind of data is very helpful. There's a lot of it out there. This is helpful to present to people, especially if you have access to their log files. Another stat that's really useful to use is bounce rate on mobile devices. Because if someone comes to the website on a mobile phone and they can't see what they want, they're going to bounce. So in this example, this is real data, by the way. The bounce rate was cut in half, a little more than half, after the responsive site was implemented. What this did for me as a developer was this gives me data that I can use for my sales process for other companies. If you don't have this data because you don't have enough history, there is information out there that people show these kinds of examples that you can use that aren't your own. These are my own examples, which are great. there's an interesting thing going on here in that if you've noticed in both of these slides, I hid the box. There's a white box at the top, and there's a white box at the bottom. I hid the desktop numbers in this example. So I was just showing you the mobile. My next slide is going to point out something to you that you need to use as another advantage for responsive web design, is that there's an understated value in building a responsive website in that when you think about mobile first and you start focusing on what a website does on a mobile device, you start cutting out all the crap on a website. So you take, in the past, people trying to fill, this screen that's this big with stuff. Now we're designing and thinking about a device this big, so all of the crap that was put in before is disappearing, and we're seeing the most important content on a website. As a result, in this website, not only did the mobile statistics improve, but so did the desktop. The desktop numbers improved, as well as the mobile numbers improved for the fact that we had a responsive site in place. Because now we're starting to pay attention a lot more to the space that we had and making the most important content show up. Okay. Last step here. So we've got first step, define the problem, create the vision, provide expert advice or expert support and data. Last thing, demos and examples. It is very important to provide demos, and the more interactive, the better, for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Real-time demos are better than sort of screenshot demos. Demos should consist of failure and success. So when you demo things, when I say demo, so we're now talking about pulling up real time on a computer screen, going online, looking at websites. You're going to show them what you mean. You want to provide them links for later. Yeah, okay, it's on my next slide. We'll get to a couple of points here. An important thing for responsive design specifically is show a user how to shrink the browser, shrink it in, and you see their website go down and open. So when you show a user that, you have now armed them with your argument that they will forever, whenever they're looking at a website, they're going to grab that corner and shrink it down and look. They'll be critiquing every single website they look at from that point on if you show them that trick, but they've got to see it, and they've got to see you do it and try it themselves. So they'll be arguing for responsive design the minute they see that trick done. You must have, the last point here on demos, is you must have phones and tablets in people's hands. So I know everyone has a smartphone now. Carry an extra smartphone. Have a 7-inch tablet, have a 10-inch tablet. Have a little bit of a flavor and put the devices in someone's hands to sell responsive design. It's very important. I got more to do, but any questions about those 4 points particularly? No. Good. Delivery. So I've talked about this sales presentation that you would do. How would you deliver it? You always want to have this kind of pitch formatted and presented with visuals. I've hit you over the head with that so far. Even if it's a one-on-one conversation, I would never sit down with someone and try to do those 4 steps that I just described to you without having something prepared ahead of time. And if you have to be in a coffee shop to do this with someone one-on-one, you can still do it real-time with a PowerPoint. That gives you the opportunity to do real-time demos, to slide the screen in and out. I've been in the position many, many times that I have to do it with a printout, and I'm absolutely fine with that. But I would never, ever sit and try to convince or share my vision with somebody in an unstructured way. For this kind of stuff, it's too big, there's too much content. They need to have something that they can carry home with them to think about and understand after they leave you. Real-time presentation is the best way to do it. Real-time meaning we're interacting. That could be two ways. One way, face-to-face, obviously the preferred way, although the convenient way is an online meeting. But having it interactive is the best way to deliver this content and this sales pitch to somebody. So the best option, face-to-face. Plan B is the online. Another technique that I've been using for a while, and it's been extremely effective, is to use a video. So to fire up your screen sharing tool or whatever you're using to create a video with your picture in the screen and your slide presentation ready, pretending the person's there in front of you, and give him a 10 to 15-minute presentation on your topic. It's effective for people you don't know because it's a way to introduce you more than, hey, my name is Steve, I'd love to talk to you. You can give demo, you can hit all of those same points that we talked, those 4 points. You can have a demo ready of their website. You can show them an interactive discussion. You can do a slide presentation. And you're in complete control, so you can control the length of it. And it's also great for customers that you already know. Because you could say, hey, Bob, VP of such and such, you know what? I just sent you an email. Leave the phone call. Just sent you an email. I know you're extremely busy. If you could take a look at this video sometime in the next 2 weeks, I'll give you a call back and maybe we can talk about this more. It's a great way for you to bundle that content and give it to them. The last point on the video is like the PowerPoint, but even better, it has legs, lots of legs. That VP watches that video for 15 minutes and it says, hey, you know what? Let me send this off to 5 people. They're now watching it. So it's a great way to spread the word. It's a little difficult to do because you'll find yourself spending 3 hours to record a 15-minute video. You'll find that over time it gets quicker and easier when you stop worrying about the mistakes you make. And as we're running out of time, the last point that I wanted to make today and just re-emphasize from the beginning is that it doesn't matter if it's the person answering the phone in your company. It doesn't matter if it's the person responding to an email, the invoices that are going out the door. I always tell my developers, I brought the sale in. It's your job to make the next sale. Because anybody's interaction with a customer, doesn't matter what point it is, any touch point in your company with a customer is sales. So my developers are always, keep telling them they're making the next sale by how they treat this customer, good or bad, during the whole process. So always keep in mind that everyone is selling all the time. And that's the end for me. Any questions?